It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
Isaiah and the Day of the Lord. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we're so glad that you've chosen to join us for this study, which is getting so exciting. If you're brand new to watching Unraveling Revelation and you're just jumping in the middle of the stream and you're thinking, they're in Isaiah. What's that got to do with the book of Revelation? Well, we take it a little wider than that. We figure everything that the Lord has told us, what he's revealed about himself, is revealing Jesus Christ. And we also don't think that you can understand the book of Revelation
That's right.
without understanding the other prophecies.
It's pretty clear that John had read the Old Testament prophets. He knew Ezekiel, he knew his Isaiah, he knew his Jeremiah and his Zechariah and Daniel, because imagery that John includes in the book of Revelation is drawn from all parts of the Old Testament. In fact, when we began our study almost 100 episodes ago,
Gosh,
we began...
has it been close to that?
Yeah, we're getting close to episode 100. I
Wow.
forgot to check and see where we're at exactly, but it's pretty
Wow.
close. But we began with the book of Genesis, because unless you understand the fall and the entities responsible for the fall and then subsequent rebellions, not just what happened in the garden, but what happened prior to the garden, chaos, Leviathan, what happened in the garden, of course, then what happened at Mount Hermon with the sons of God of Genesis 6, who they are, who they created through their commingling with humanity, and then Genesis 10 and 11 with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and those entities, because the Jewish religious scholars of the days leading up through the time of the apostles understood that all of those were responsible for the state of the world we find it in to this day.
It's like going to a baseball game in the final inning or even in overtime, not any knowledge of how the game is played, why the game is played, nor do you know the players.
And trying to understand the rules at that
Yes.
point. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. So that's why we're in Isaiah, because Isaiah, of all the Old Testament prophets, probably refers to the day of the Lord. Well, no, not probably. He does. He refers to the day of the Lord more frequently than any other. And,
A lot.
Yeah, and that is a very important day, because that is the day when God finally says, that's it, I've had enough, I'm coming down. And that is when Armageddon takes place, when the enemy is defeated, and then the
Yes.
1,000-year millennial reign begins.
I would argue that the day of the Lord begins at the midway point in the tribulation week.
Okay, so it's not just a day, it is a period of time.
Right. It's a period of time. If you think of it as that's a 24-hour day, no. It is when the Lord says, I no longer have any patience with you. It essentially, we're going to read it. In fact, we did read it already in the book of Revelation, where the angels were rejoicing.
Yes.
The earth is now yours. You've bought it back, and now you have the legal document. You have all the proof. These legalistic fallen angels, they are going to see this proof, and they know you're coming to take it back. The owner of the field is coming to kick the stewards out.
That's right. There are parables in the New Testament that make more sense when you understand it in the context of the long war. Well, we had discussed a couple of weeks ago the judgment against Babylon. And we want to kind of pick up from there, but then lead from Isaiah 13 and that oracle into Isaiah 14, which is, again, ostensibly an oracle against Babylon. But we think it's one of those already but not yet fulfillments.
And we're going to eventually discuss Babylon in a way that is going to surprise most of you, I think.
Because scholars now know that Babylon in in Mesopotamia was a name that did not just apply to the city founded by the Amorites and that became the kingdom headed up by Hammurabi the great lawgiver, and then later went through a number of changes, finally taken over by the Chaldeans, the father of Nebuchadnezzar. Nabopolassar established their independence from Assyria. Nebuchadnezzar made it a great empire. It was finally lost about 60 years later when Cyrus the Great and the Medes and Persians came in. And certainly the judgment that Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah 13 and 14 was fulfilled in the near term when the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians and the Medes. Isaiah, in fact, even prophesied that when he called out Cyrus 150 years before time.
Yes.
So we know that there was a near-term fulfillment in view. But in Mesopotamia, the name Babylon did not always apply to the city of Babylon. It also applied to a number of other cities, including Nippur, which was the home city, the city that was sacred to the chief god of Mesopotamia, Enlil, whom we talked about in this series before. It was also applied to Eridu, which was an ancient Sumerian city, believed to be the very first Sumerian city where kingship first came down from heaven. It was the site of the temple called the Iabzu, home of the god Enki. This was the home, the house of the abyss, the Iabzu. That's where we get the word abyss. And it was believed that from there, the god Enki sent forth the Apkallu, which was the Mesopotamian concept of the Watchers, these sons of God who caused humanity to sin by teaching us things we weren't supposed to know. That was at Eridu. It was also Nineveh, which was the home city of the Assyrians, was also sometimes called Babylon. Why? Because Babylon, in Hebrew, Bab-el, derived from the Akkadian Bab-ilu, means gate of God or gate of the gods.
The god, and sometimes the gods.
Gate of the god, perhaps, yes.
Each city had its own god, its own deity that sort of ran the town.
Right.
And they all had to worship that deity in addition to all of the others. Each city that had a city god had a special gate that was called the Bab-el, the gate of the god, or the gate of God, or the gate of the gods. And oftentimes these cities would have a procession where they would take the god out of town, out of this gate, perform a ritual with the god's statue, then return through the same gate. And of course, when the god decided on his own or her own, depending upon the god or goddess, they would come through that gate. You might think of that as a portal. Each of these Babylons, spiritual Babylons, had a portal in it. So when we talk about Babylon, it's difficult to pin it down to one region or one city. When you talk about spiritual Babylon, that gets into a whole lot of other ideas. But when we get to the discussion of the whore of Babylon,
yes,
the woman who rides the beast, trust me, it's not going to go in the direction you think.
Yeah. So this is
I think it's an exciting direction.
Oh, I think it is too. It's now somewhat speculative because the Bible's not explicit here, and we only refer to, the only ultimate source of truth that we cannot question and do not question is the Bible itself. We're just trying to fit together the evidence and draw conclusions from the evidence that we're finding both in the scriptures and through archaeology.
And we're not the only ones that are drawing conclusions like that. Some of our support, extra biblical support, comes from the Book of Enoch.
Yes.
Which has a lot of scholars who agree that the Book of Enoch, if it's not canonical, is really close to it because it's quoted in the Bible and the stories are very, very similar.
Let's draw some parallels here now as we move from Isaiah 13 into Isaiah 14. And in Isaiah 13, there are specific references to God stirring up the Medes and the Persians against the Chaldeans. So again, we know that's the near term.
Well, before we go, let me derail you for a second because in the Septuagint, in verse 2 of Isaiah 13, we get into the idea of what we just discussed.
True.
It says, "Lift up a standard on the mountain of the plain," the mountain of the plain, the mountain.
Okay.
Sometimes
all right.
that's referring to a god.
Right,
but
right.
the mountain of the plain, exalt the voice to them, beckon with the hand. Open the gates, ye rulers, or ye princes. Open the gates, ye rulers. As if these princes have control of the gates.
The gates.
And who's coming through the gates?
Well, that's where we continue on.
Verse 3, yes.
Where God says, I myself have commanded my consecrated ones. We talked about this just a couple of weeks ago, but it's good to revisit this to, again,
because I
remember
hadn't
the
noticed
context.
this part before.
Well, true. And the Septuagint, as we've said before, was translated by Jewish religious scholars several centuries before the birth of Jesus, who were working from older Hebrew texts. And so they had a different understanding, perhaps, of the Hebrew texts than we have, because our English Bibles derive from the Masoretic texts, which are completed around the 9th or the 10th century A.D., so about 1,200 years later.
And there were some changes in that
right.
text to help eliminate that second power in heaven.
Right, to de-emphasize the existence of other entities in the spirit realm, because when you start allowing for that possibility, then you allow for the possibility that those Christians were right when they said, we know who the angel of Yahweh was in the Old Testament. That was Jesus of Nazareth. And the Masoretic, the Jews after the 2nd century did not want to allow for that possibility.
When was the Masoretic text?
About 900 AD.
Oh,
so about 10th century
a long
AD.
time later.
Right, exactly. So we're talking about 1,200 years difference between the translation of the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, which is the basis for English Old Testament Bibles.
Also, we want to remind you that during the 1st century when Jesus was teaching his disciples, more than likely the scrolls that they could read on their own, because most of them, if they were educated at all, they read Greek.
Yeah, and it was
That's what
probably
the Septuagint was.
Exactly.
It was Greek.
So this, in the Septuagint, verse 3 is really interesting because it doesn't say, my consecrated ones, my proudly exulting or boasting arrogant ones, as we get in English. The Septuagint is different. Giants are coming, which was the title of our episode from a couple of weeks ago.
But this idea of the princes being ordered by Yahweh to open the gates, open the city gate, open the Babel, to let these entities through. The princes, the question in my mind is, are these loyal princes? Because we have that principality, which is a type of spirit being that is very high up in the orders. And if a principality is in charge of opening a portal, then is this one of Yahweh's loyal angels with a key? Remember, who's got the keys? It's Jesus.
Hell and death, yeah.
Yes, it's Jesus. So is he handing a key and saying, open this? Or is the fallen realm being allowed to open them? I would argue that it could be either one, because there are an awful lot of human beings these days that are involved in experiments that the humans have no idea what it is that they're really playing with.
Yeah, tourism to South America to partake of ayahuasca, to open up gates.
Portals in your mind,
Right.
exactly. And
Right.
there are portals on Earth that may go back to ancient times that we just aren't aware of, or maybe the fallen realm have told the humans, convinced them some way, that you're going to be famous, you're going to get this done, and you're going to find this particle, and boy, you're going. But I'm telling you, some of these things are really, really close to fulfilling this prophecy.
I agree, and I think when we look at the context of Isaiah 13 and 14 together, and then this is going to take a couple of weeks, but we'll get the context of Isaiah 14.
We're not going to race through it?
No.
We crawl through Scripture.
But we'll tell you why we believe this connects to the Rephaim and the netherworld when Unraveling Revelation continues.
I have spent a lifetime uncovering secrets buried beneath the sands of time by those who want them to remain concealed in mystery. But I did not expect to discover a series of clues from the future that were suddenly made known, the saga of which will now be revealed.
It is the names of the secret society members, the founding fathers that set America on course to an enigma.
Before and after the presidency of Donald Trump, the United States was, and now is again, on a trajectory to fulfill what famous Freemason Manly P. Hall described as the secret destiny of America.
It is the prophecy on the Great Seal of the United States, a scheme hidden in plain sight by the Founding Fathers for more than 200 years, foretelling the return of a terrifying demonic god who seizes control of Earth in the new order of the ages. The prophecy indicates he will arrive in 2025.
Now, Dr. Horn's research has uncovered an anomaly he never expected to find. Clues 200 years in the making which unlock the riddle of Zeitgeist 2025 and what the world is not ready to receive. Hidden secrets and forgotten prophecies from Qumran forecasting the year 2025 as the final age of man. How the current U.S. government is tied to America's occult destiny. Why historians and intelligence agencies foresee a totalitarian world government by 2025. How America's capital city is laid out to actuate arrival of Antichrist. Zeitgeist 2025.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. If you've got your mug of tea at home or your coffee or whatever, have a swig and maybe a little bit of a cookie or something like that. We don't have any cookies in here. We want to remind you that if you have not received an email and you signed up for the Skywatch TV Tour of Israel for October of 2021, if you've not received an email from Lipkin Tours, you should have, because the date has been changed to March of 2022. Aaron suggested it because he's aware of how we all feel about the requirements for travel right now. He doesn't think Israel is going to change at all between now and the time that we go, so he is saying let's put it off until next March. The weather's great in March. It'll be a great time to be there. So if you've not signed up, then now is your chance. But if you don't have a passport, start that process now. Even if you don't know that you're going to go, but you think you might want to go somewhere next year that needs a passport, start that process now, because we have been told the line is long.
Yeah, apparently the backlog caused by COVID has now created about a 4-month wait for new passports. When we got our passports back
we got them
in
in
2017,
about 4
we got them
weeks.
in about a month. But now it's running about a 4-month backlog. So if you want to get, if you're thinking you might want to go, even if you don't use it, having a passport's a good idea. And with a 4-month lead time, you can take care of this at your local post office, and it will then be in hand. If you wait and think, 2 months out, I'd like to go, you may not have enough time to get your passport if you don't already have one. Or if you've got one, you might want to check to see if it needs to be renewed if you've had it for a while. So, take care of that. Again, backlog caused by COVID, one of the many changes in life over the last 18 months, thanks to that little virus.
Constant changes. That's the only thing it doesn't change, is that it changes.
So skywatchingisrael.com for the latest information about the tour. Well, as we discussed previously, and we talked about this entity in Isaiah 14 and Ashur, the chief god of Assyria, and his connection to Enlil, the chief god of Mesopotamia, and El, the chief god of the Canaanites. I'm arguing in my forthcoming book, The Second Coming of Saturn, that it's that entity in view in Isaiah 14. Now, traditionally, Isaiah 14, "How art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning," is understood to be Satan. And based on Matthew 12, verses 22 through 26, and the letter to the church of Pergamum in Revelation 2, I think Satan is equated with the storm god, Baal, Zeus, Jupiter. I think what we're looking at here is this older entity, or at least a different rebel. Let's put it that way.
I think one of the big stumbling blocks is the word Lucifer.
Right.
It's not a proper name.
No, it is not. It is based on the Hebrew Helen Ben Shachar, which means Lightbringer, son of Dawn. Shachar was an entity that was known by the Canaanites as Dawn, but Lightbringer, Halel, they've not really found a good equivalent in Canaanite literature, but there is a scholar whose work was cited by our friend Dr. Doug Hamp in his most recent book, Corrupting the Image 2. And I'm glad he put me onto this because it helped fill in some pieces of the puzzle for my forthcoming book, that Halel is actually just a Canaanite, or Ugaritic rather, transliteration of the Akkadian name of Enlil.
Yeah.
Elil, Halel. It's a technical linguistic argument. You have to be an expert in those languages to understand.
You do, the way they substitute one phoneme for another.
Right. But it fits.
Yeah.
It fits. Hammurabi ben Shachar is more likely Enlil, in other words, El of the Canaanites, or Kronos of the Greeks, Saturn of the Romans. And when you look at the context of Isaiah 14, Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades, the Rephaim, to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. These were the Nephilim, the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
Yeah.
And they are now welcoming the one who led the rebellion, Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, that led to their creation, and saying, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. That's what Isaiah is saying here. So I think that's who we're looking at here in Isaiah 14. And I know this is not going to be widely accepted.
No, but let me ask you a question, because it's one that pops into my head. If Halel bin Shachar is Enlil, Enlil is Shemihazah.
Right, the watcher chief who led the rebellion, yes.
The Rephaim, the spirits of the giants, are not presently in Tartarus.
No.
Or in Hades. They are free to wreak havoc on the earth. So at what point in time, future time, does this take place that they are now in Hades?
Well, that's a good question. And I was reading a commentary by Dr. Michael Heiser on the book of Enoch, because in Enoch, several chapters in Enoch, First Enoch chapters 18 and 21, we see descriptions of mountains, burning mountains in a place. And specifically, First Enoch 18, it's the angels who commingled with women. In fact, I managed to remember to bring that up here. Enoch says, writes, I came and saw a place that was burning night and day, where there were 7 mountains of precious stones, 3 lying to the east and 3 to the south. And beyond these mountains is a place, the edge of the great earth. There the heavens come to an end. And I saw a great chasm among pillars of heavenly fire. And I saw in it pillars of fire descending, and they were immeasurable toward the depth and toward the height. This is a description, according to Dr. Heiser, most likely of Tartarus, of what in the Greek mind would be Tartarus. And Uriel, the archangel who had charge over Tartarus, said to me, there stand the angels who mingled with the women, and their spirits, having assumed many forms, bring destruction on men, and lead them astray to sacrifice to demons as to gods, demons being the spirits of the Rephaim, until the day of the great judgment, in which they will be judged with finality. So the final day of the Lord is the day when all of this comes to an end. According to Enoch, the demons are allowed to wander the earth, tormenting humanity until the judgment.
That's what I assumed the answer would be, that this is after the day of the Lord, when he's one of the last ones to be thrown back down there.
Possibly, but it could be that when he was thrown down originally in Tartarus and chained up, that Sheol, now, to meet him when he comes sounds incongruous, because it's not Sheol where these watchers were confined. It's Tartarus, which is a separate level of the underworld.
But if you're reading this as applying to 2 different situations, one being actual human going down there, the king, and the other one being an entity who was behind the king, who later is released
again,
for a
already,
short
but
time.
not yet.
Yes.
Okay.
And then thrown back down.
Right. Yeah.
The only time those demons would be imprisoned would be after the day of the Lord.
Yes, that's true.
I think.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
They would be destroyed, after the day of the Lord, because when they reach their final end, and we'll talk about this next week.
They've reached their final destination.
They've reached their final destination in the Valley of the Travelers, and we'll talk about that when we get to Ezekiel 39. But there are other clues in Isaiah 14, and we've kind of discussed this. I mean, he's referred to as the king of Babylon, but it's the king of Babel, the king of the God Gate.
Yes, the one who thinks he controls all of these portals.
Right. And in Revelation 9, of course, he is described as, and this is the other tease for the forthcoming book, I'm arguing that this entity, Shemihazah, is the one called Abaddon or Apollyon in Revelation 9. He is the king over those things that come out of the abyss.
Mm-hmm. Now, if that's making your head explode, don't worry about it. Because it will make your head explode when you first hear that idea. But Derek's not the only one who thinks that. He makes a really, really good case in the book. So if you read the book when it finally is published this fall, and your head still wants to explode at the end of it, great. I mean, that happens. That's the beauty of all of this study, is as you're watching this and as you're studying with your friends and your family, you may or may not agree with the things that we say. Our joy is that you want to prove us wrong by digging into Scripture on your own.
Yeah.
Because you might prove us wrong.
Absolutely. And many of these tools that we're using are available online. We have links at our website, gilberthouse.org. We'll put links also at unravelingrevelation.tv, where all of our episodes are available, going back to the very first one. The thing that is just really blew my mind, and we've known this for a few years now, is verse 21 here, where it reads, "Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities." And again, the clue there that this means more than you would think. Well, I mean, what's wrong with cities? Most of us live in cities anymore in the modern world. The Hebrew word for cities, irim, is identical to the Aramaic word for watchers. Fill the face of the world with watchers.
That's a little more scary than cities. I don't like cities, big cities, but watchers.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary.
So we've just scratched the surface here. Isaiah 14 is a fascinating chapter that deals with not just what happened in the past to this entity where he was cast out and down to the netherworld, but also his future. May the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named, lest they rise and possess the earth. Well, God has already decreed that ain't going to happen. Day of the Lord, that's when all of this comes to an end. God has given us humans and our elder brothers, the angelic realm, free will to choose to be obedient and serve him, or to be disloyal and try to serve ourselves. And like us, many of the angels and watchers have chosen badly. But a day is coming when God will return and bring justice to the earth. Come quickly, Lord. Thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.
Unraveling Revelation is part of Skywatch TV, a viewer-supported ministry. To learn more about Skywatch TV and the work of our sister ministry, Whispering Ponies Ranch, please visit our website, skywatchtv.com. And please join us for our weekly study of the Bible, verse by verse in chronological order, online at gilberthouse.org.